This happened about 2 years ago when I was 26 and living in a mid-sized city in the Midwest. I had been single for almost a year and a friend of mine convinced me to try one of the bigger dating apps. I wasn't really looking for anything serious. I just wanted to meet new people and maybe go on a few casual dates. After a couple of weeks of swiping, I matched with a guy I'll call Derek. His profile seemed normal. He had 4 photos, a short bio about hiking and dogs, and his job listed as a regional sales rep. We talked for about a week before he asked if I wanted to grab drinks. I said yes and picked a small wine bar downtown that I'd been to 100 times. It was always busy on weekends and the staff knew me. We agreed on Saturday at 7. I told my roommate the plan, sent her his profile, and shared my location on my phone. I wasn't paranoid. It was just what I always did. I got to the bar about 10 minutes early and sat at a small table near the front window. At 7:05, a man walked in and looked around. It took me a few seconds to recognize him because he looked significantly older than his photos. Not by a little. By maybe 10 or 12 years. His hair was thinner and his face was different in a way I couldn't put into words. He sat down across from me and smiled. He said it was nice to finally meet me and apologized for being late. I told him it was fine. I tried to push past the photo thing in my head and just have a normal conversation. The first thing that felt off was when I asked about his job. He paused like he had to think about the answer. Then he gave me a different job title than the one on his profile. When I gently pointed that out and laughed about it, he said he had been promoted recently and forgot to update it. That seemed possible, so I let it go. The next thing was the drink. The waitress came over and I ordered a glass of red wine. He ordered the same. When the drinks came, he insisted on switching glasses with me because he said mine looked fuller. I told him I didn't mind and that he could have the fuller one. He laughed and said it was a joke, but he still swapped them anyway. I didn't drink from mine after that. About 20 minutes in, he asked if I wanted to leave and go somewhere quieter. We had been there for less than half an hour. I told him I was happy where we were. He kept pushing. He suggested a bar a few blocks away, then a restaurant, then his apartment, which he said was close. I told him I had to use the bathroom. I took my purse and my phone and walked to the back of the bar. When I got into the bathroom, I texted my roommate and told her something was off and asked her to call me in 2 minutes and pretend it was an emergency. She called right on time. I came back to the table holding my phone and told him my roommate had locked herself out and I had to go. He stared at me. He didn't say anything for about 5 seconds. Then he asked if he could walk me to my car. I told him no, that I was parked right out front. I wasn't. I was parked 3 blocks away. He stood up when I stood up. I walked to the front of the bar and waved at the bartender, who I knew. I made a point of saying her name loudly. Then I stepped outside. I walked the opposite direction of where my car actually was. When I got to the end of the block, I looked back. He was standing in the doorway of the bar watching me. I turned the corner and immediately picked up my pace. I cut through an alley I knew and looped around to my car from the back. When I got to my car, I sat for a minute in the driver's seat with the doors locked. That's when I saw him. He was at the end of the street, walking slowly, looking at parked cars. He hadn't seen me yet. I started the engine and pulled away as fast as I could. I unmatched him that night and blocked his number. A week later, I got a message request on a different app from an account with no photos. It said only one word: my name. I deleted both apps that night. I found out months later through a mutual friend of a friend that a man matching his description had been arrested in another state for drugging women at bars. I never confirmed if it was him. But the photo I saw in the article looked enough like him that I haven't used a dating app since.
I'm a guy in my early 30s, and this happened to me about 4 years ago. I had just moved to a new city for work, and I didn't know anyone outside of my coworkers. After a few months of being lonely, I made a profile on one of the more popular apps. I matched with a woman I'll call Hannah. She was in her late 20s, worked as a dental hygienist, and had a really easy sense of humor over text. We talked for about 2 weeks before meeting up. She suggested a coffee shop near her place on a Sunday afternoon. When I got there, she was already sitting at a table. She looked exactly like her photos, and she was friendly right away. The conversation was easy. We were there for about an hour and a half. Toward the end, she asked if I wanted to walk to a small park nearby. It was a nice day, and I said sure. We walked for maybe 10 minutes before she asked if I'd want to come back to her apartment to keep hanging out. I was surprised, but not in a bad way. She seemed completely normal. I said yes. Her apartment was on the 3rd floor of a small building about 3 blocks from a park. When we got inside, the first thing I noticed was how quiet it was. There was no TV on, no music, nothing. She offered me a drink, and I asked for water. I sat down on her couch. The living room was clean, but almost empty. There was no art on the walls, no photos, no books, just a couch, a coffee table, and a TV that wasn't plugged in. I made a joke about her just moving in. She said she had lived there for 2 years. She handed me the water and sat down next to me. She started asking questions that didn't match the energy of the date. She asked if I lived alone. She asked if anyone knew I was there. She asked if my coworkers knew her name. I started to get a knot in my stomach. I gave vague answers. I said my roommate was expecting me back soon, even though I didn't have a roommate. She nodded slowly and went quiet. After about a minute of silence, she stood up and said she needed to grab something from the bedroom. She walked down a short hallway and shut the door behind her. I stood up and looked around. I noticed a second door across from the bedroom. It was open just a crack. I don't know why I walked toward it, but I did. I pushed it open with my foot. It was a small room with no furniture. The floor was covered in plastic sheeting. The walls had plastic sheeting taped halfway up. There was a single folding chair in the middle of the room. I didn't think. I walked straight to the front door and let myself out. I didn't grab my jacket. I didn't say goodbye. I took the stairs 2 at a time and didn't stop until I was outside. I called an Uber from across the street. While I was waiting, I watched her building. About 3 minutes after I left, I saw a curtain move in a 3rd floor window. She was looking out, scanning the street. I ducked behind a parked car and didn't move until my ride came. I never messaged her again. She never messaged me. I told one friend what happened, and he told me I was probably overreacting and that maybe she was painting the room. I went back and forth for weeks, wondering if I made the whole thing into something it wasn't. About 6 months later, a woman in that same neighborhood was reported missing. The case got local news coverage for a few days. I checked the address listed in one of the articles. It wasn't her building, but it was on the same block. I never went to the police because I didn't have anything concrete to give them. Just a feeling and a folding chair in a plastic-lined room. But I think about that room every time I see a dating app commercial. This happened to me last year. I'm a woman in my late 20s and I had been using dating apps on and off for years without any real issues. I'd had bad dates and weird messages, but nothing that ever scared me. I matched with a guy I'll call Marcus. He was 31, said he worked in IT, and seemed thoughtful and low pressure over text. We talked for about 3 weeks before meeting because his work schedule was hectic. He suggested we meet for dinner at a sushi place I had been to before. I liked that he picked somewhere public and well lit. We met at 7 on a Friday. He was already there when I arrived. He stood up to greet me and pulled out my chair. He was polite and easy to talk to. Dinner went well. We split the bill, which I appreciated, and he asked if I wanted to grab dessert at a place a few doors down. I said yes. We walked over and got ice cream and sat outside on a bench. It was getting dark by then. After about 20 minutes, he checked his watch and said he should probably head home because he had an early morning. I agreed, and we started walking back toward where we had parked. My car was in a small public lot 1 block away. His was on the street a little further down. He offered to walk me to my car first. I let him. When we got to my car, he hugged me and said he had a great time. I said the same. He stepped back and waved and started walking back the way we came. I got in my car, locked the doors, and started the engine. I sat for a minute responding to a text from my sister. That's when I saw him in my rearview mirror. He hadn't kept walking. He was standing at the entrance of the parking lot, partially hidden behind a parked SUV. He was watching my car. I didn't move. I pretended to keep texting. After about 30 seconds, he started walking toward my car. Not fast, slow and deliberate. I put the car in drive and pulled out of the spot immediately. I drove past him as I exited the lot. He stopped walking and stared at me as I drove by. He didn't wave. He didn't smile. He just watched. I didn't go home. I drove to a 24-hour grocery store about 15 minutes away and parked under a light near the entrance. I sat in the car for an hour. I kept checking my mirrors. When I finally drove home, I took a long route and made several unnecessary turns. I lived in an apartment complex with a gated parking garage. When I pulled in, I sat in my car for another 10 minutes before going inside. That night, I deleted the app and blocked his number. I thought that was the end of it. 3 days later, my doorbell camera notified me of motion at 2 a.m. I checked the recording the next morning. It was him. He was standing on my front step, looking up at the camera. He stayed there for about 40 seconds and then walked away. I had never told him my address. I had never told him my apartment complex. I had never even told him what part of the city I lived in. I called the police and showed them the footage. They took a report. They went to the address he had given me on the app. It didn't exist. The IT company he said he worked for had never heard of him. The phone number he gave me was a burner. They never found him. I moved out of that apartment 3 weeks later and broke my lease. I now live in a building with a doorman, and I haven't been on a dating app since. The part that still bothers me the most is that I have no idea how he found me. I never let him see my license plate. I never told him where I worked. I was careful about everything. But somehow, He knew exactly where I slept.